Hello Internet, welcome to the channel. My name is Frankie, and in today's video we are going to start building what is probably going to be the largest part of Foliage Wildlife Park, and that is the African grasslands and deserts. Starting a new section for a zoo is just as daunting, in my opinion, as starting an entirely new zoo. So in order to make this as easy and as smooth a process as possible, I'm going to start by sketching out where I want some things very roughly with the sand tool in the terrain editor. What I'm doing is kind of painting a large circle because I know I want to have a large circular area that's going to be split up into various habitats, and then I can sketch out where the staff area is going to be in the middle, kind of suggest where some paths are going to be, and where some other habitats around it are going to be. Before actually starting to do this on the actual game, I did use a pen and paper to draw a small kind of map. It was really small. I think it's only 5 habitats that I've planned, just to give myself an idea of what I want the start of this area to look like. And as you can see, it's a circle. So yeah, I just sketch it out using some sand, and then it's time to move on to pathing to really start to make this a bit more of a reality. When selecting a path for this part of the zoo, I ended up going for the rounded log path, which looks like some logs have been sunk into the ground and you're looking at the tops of them, or the ends of them, whatever way you want to look at it. Yeah, I think this rustic look really will blend in quite nicely to the tribal kind of aesthetic that I'm going to be going for. So I'm just doing an offshoot from our main pathing that leads to the temperate hills and stuff, and then I'm going to, by pressing in on the gamepad, I think that's what it's called, the touchpad in the middle of the PlayStation remote, you can turn off the path joining, which means it's not going to immediately snap to the path that we just added, meaning you can start from wherever you want. From there I can start to create a circle. And to do this, I'm going to get the length of my path to a length that I'm happy with, and in this case I'm just going to stick to 2 meters, and then you can turn on the angle snap. Now, if you want to have a larger circle, keep the angle snap at a lower angle. If you want it to be a smaller circle, increase the angle snap. What this does is it allows you to add a path and then just tap your joystick ever so slightly in one direction, whether that be left or right. And if you continue to do that each time you add a path, you will create a perfect circle. And as you can see here, I was starting with the 22.5 degrees angle snap, and it was way too small. So I deleted all of that and started again with an angle of 15 degrees rather than 22.5, which meant that the circle was going to be a little bit bigger. And you can kind of adjust it if you want to have a certain angle, but you don't want it to impact the size of your circle too much. You can, instead of just tapping your analog stick once, you could tap it twice, and that will create a tighter circle for you. Just make sure you're doing the same movement each time you add a new path, otherwise it will end up uneven. And when you reach the starting point, I like to delete that first path that you initially placed, because that was a completely straight one without any bend in it. So if you get rid of that, you can then join the remaining pieces with a nice curve that matches the rest of your circle. Now, I know that I want this circle to be broken up into 3 different habitats that are going to be identical in shape. It kind of just segments the circle, meaning that we can just create one of these habitats, then copy and paste it around. So to do that, we're going to start making a custom barrier, and it's been quite a while since I did that. So what I'm using is the mud wall pieces from the Africa theme pack. I'm just using the 1 meter tall kind of strip, and the idea is to have a really low wall at the front that guests can easily see over into the habitat, and then have the walls rise up a little bit at the back. These habitats are going to have animals that aren't very well known for their jumping abilities, to say the least. So I need to place some of these 1 meter wall pieces following the curvature of the path that we've laid down. Each time you add another piece, it's going to try and join it to that existing group. So just push in on your right analog stick to deselect the group so that you can adjust it and make sure this curve is nice and fluid. Now, whilst I continue the rather boring task of copy and pasting pieces to continue this curved wall, I would just like to point out that only 19% of my viewers are currently subscribed to the channel. If you get any value from watching my videos, please consider subscribing so that you can see my videos appearing in your subscription feed. It's free, it really helps support the channel, and it makes me feel slightly less lonely. Once I was happy with the general size of this initial wall, it was time to move on to the edges, the side walls that would then lead towards the back, obviously. What I'm going to do is, initially I thought I was going to use the 2-meter wall, but I end up using the 1-meter wall, kind of just joining it directly to what we've already placed, getting it to the same height, and then adding a gable piece or a triangular piece, whichever way you want to describe it, which will allow us a nice smooth transition into a slightly higher wall. It just ends up looking a lot nicer that way. It's a bit more smooth of a finish. And this does then get us to the 2-meter height that we were after, meaning that we can continue the wall onwards. I misspoke actually there. The slant itself is 2 meters high, so I'm adding a 2-meter piece on top of these 1-meter pieces, so actually at 3 meters in total, which is completely, totally fine. And none of the animals we're putting in here are able to jump 3 meters. They're not even able to jump that 1 meter at the front, so we're completely safe. Once the 2 side walls are complete, we can move on to the back, and to build that I'm just using the 1-meter piece at the bottom and then a 2-meter piece on top. You could actually make this a bit more simple, which I've only just thought of right now. You could use a 4-meter tall piece, just sink it into the floor and then copy and paste it along. That way you only have to use 1 piece rather than, well, this doubles it doing it this way, so yeah, hindsight's a beautiful thing. And with the back wall complete, I can start to copy and paste this habitat barrier to fill the circle the way that I wanted. And it's not until I start copy and pasting that I realise just how wonky these things are, which is a simple enough fix and it doesn't really take any time at all, but I'm not going to bore you with that footage. In the centre of the circle, right behind the 3 habitats, I'm going to start adding our staff buildings, and I'm going to be adding the blueprinted versions that fit the Africa theme. I'm not going to mess about making my own buildings. They're here, so why not just use them? They look great. It's better than I could do anyway. So yeah, just going to place the necessities down, which is a keeper hut, a staff room. I do add a vet to this area because it's quite far away, the other one. And I also add a research facility because there are going to be new animals here. So we need a vet at least researching the newest animals all the time. So we're going to need that building. And with those bits and pieces done, we can start to move on to actually making a habitat. And for this episode, we are going to be focusing on the Nile Monitor. The first animal that I wanted to build for in the African area was the aardvark, but at the moment there's a community challenge in which we have to breed silver-rated reptiles. So it makes sense to build for the Nile Monitor, as it was on my list of animals to have in the area. So I may as well just bring it forward so that we can kind of join in this community challenge anyway. So what you see me doing here is starting to create a kind of river area. It's not going to be that continuous. It's only going to spread between 2 habitats. This one and the one next to it, which is going to be a warthog habitat, because I think it's quite cool for them to have quite a bit of water as well. In the Nile Monitor habitat, I want there to be a little island in the middle. It's going to be predominantly water, as these guys are named after a river. I mean, come on. They're going to like a bit of water, aren't they? So yeah, I'm using the terrain altering tools. I pushed it to a depth that I was happy with, and then used flatten to terrain to mark out where I wanted the river to be. And then I can use the smooth tool to make sure there aren't any harsh edges, and then we can fill it with water just to see what it looks like. But before doing that, there is a slight issue, and that is that there is a gap under the side walls of these habitats. Now, that does mean the Nile Monitor could swim quite easily into the warthog habitat and eat the warthogs, and that would not be great. Something tells me that the welfare of the animals may decrease if they're eating each other. So yeah, we're going to try and stop that from happening. To do that, I'm going to go into the construction tab and select some large fence pieces. I'm going to be using the 4-meter tall and 4-meter wide chain link fence pieces. Quite simply, sink them into the ground and make sure the top of them are hidden within the wall, within the barrier that we've already built, and then just bridge that gap, meaning the water could flow quite freely through the chain link fence whilst keeping the animals contained within their habitats. The next thing to do is to make sure that this habitat actually registers as a habitat. So to do that, we're going to go to our barrier selection tool and select the null barrier. We can then run this through the barriers that we put in place, these mud walls, and that will force it to actually register as a barrier, meaning that this area will now register as a habitat. So the zookeepers will come and check on it, and it will tell us if an animal gets outside of this null barrier that an animal has escaped, which would obviously not be ideal. With the front of this habitat only being 1 meter tall, it presents the perfect opportunity to actually use these small habitat gates. This is something that I never get to use, but it's the perfect height. So I place one small metal habitat gate right at the front of the habitat. However, as you can see, there is mud wall inside of the gate. And I don't know about you, but I don't like that. So what I'm going to do is delete that piece, and then I'm going to go back into our construction pieces, find these mud wall pieces again, and select the 1 meter square option. I can then fill the gap either side of this gate and make sure that it blends in nicely. Then just for a little bit of thematic decoration, I'm going to use African Fence 1, I love the naming system in this game, and just set it slightly into these mud walls that we've got in place. Just rotating it as I go along. We're just going to decorate this 1 meter high wall at the front using these pieces just for a bit of theme. Now it's on to the interior of this habitat, and as you can see, these guys are going to basically want no grass. They can use some short grass, but I'm really going to lean into this sandy, deserty feeling. So it's the majority of this habitat is going to be soil, a little bit of rock, and quite a bit of sand. I did actually adopt an albino animal for once. Normally I don't adopt these. I kind of look forward to that rush of actually just having one be born in my zoo, which has happened for the first time. Literally, as I was building this, a European fallow deer had 4 albino babies, which is mental. Now that I say that out loud, I highly doubt one of the deers had 4. Yeah, okay, I think 2 of them were pregnant and both of them had albino babies. That makes a lot more sense. But yeah, I decided I was going to adopt an albino this time just for fun, to see what kind of shenanigans they get up to. Are we going to have a bunch of white babies, or are we going to have a bunch of brown babies? We shall see. Now, when it came to adding the foliage for this habitat, something that I knew I wanted straight away was a big rocky outcrop right at the back of the enclosure. Basically, that far bank of the river is going to be covered in rocks with small plants growing out from underneath it. We're also going to have some quite large coconut palm trees leaning over the river from this far bank, maybe some on the island and on the front bank as well. But we're going to be keeping most of the foliage a bit more dense near the back of the habitat because it's furthest away from the guests, which means it's not going to be getting in the way of their viewing or anything, which is obviously ideal. Yeah, I'm going to now stop talking and let you sit back and enjoy a little time lapse of me just whacking plants everywhere. Now, as gorgeous as this habitat looks, in my opinion at least, it looks very picturesque. It does actually limit where we can be placing our enrichment items to make sure our animals can use them. As always, we're going to have our food enrichment items kind of centered towards the front, because that means that our guests are going to get the best view, but also it's the only part of the habitat that our zookeepers can actually access, so they're going to need to be able to get to the food items. That's something that I would just like to point out. If you're building something like this, or an island habitat, whatever, something like that, your keepers only need to be able to access part of the habitat in order to clean the whole thing. So you don't have to worry about it going to clean that little island in the middle or the far bank. The keeper will be able to clean the whole habitat despite not actually getting over there. All you need to make sure is they can access the food tray and any food enrichment items. As for the toys, I'm going to space those out as much as possible to encourage our animals to use as much of the habitat as possible. And with those few little bits done, these guys didn't need a hard shelter, so that meant I was done. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a thumbs up and potentially subscribe to the channel to see more videos like this appearing in your subscription feed. Thank you for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.